Along the wet lowlands of the Ruhr and the Würm, poplar trees grow fast and soft, exactly the qualities a dying craft depends on. Loggers fell them in winter, saw them to length, and haul them by special wagon to a small village called Porselen near Heinsberg. There, in a modest workshop, lives Jakob Hermanns, one of the last clog makers left on the Lower Rhine. He closed his workshop for good in 1976. For this film, though, he agrees to walk through every step of a trade that once fed entire villages here: the sawing, the splitting, the shaping of a simple wooden shoe. The first step happens outside, in the open air, where trunk sections already cut to length wait on the chopping block to be split apart. The camera finds him after a slow pan across open fields and a quiet, brick-lined street, coming to rest in the paved yard beside his house. There, cap on, sleeves rolled, Hermanns begins the way his father and grandfather began before him, splitting the trunk sections on the chopping block. Each length of poplar has already been cut to roughly clog size, and every one of these near-identical pieces, what he calls a bolen, will eventually give up 4 to 6 wooden shoe blanks. Before he ever lifts an axe, Hermanns runs his palm across the top of the round log, feeling for the most favorable place to split it. He is reading the grain, not measuring with a ruler. Wherever the wood tells him to cut, he sets his wedge, then swings a heavy wooden mallet down onto it, again and again, until the axe bites deep and a second metal wedge can be driven in beside it to finish the job. The log opens. He picks up each half, sets it back on the block, positions the axe by eye, and brings the mallet down once more, working through piece after piece until a stack of rough, wedge-shaped pieces sits waiting beside the stump, split, sorted, and ready for the next stage of the process. Hermanns was born in 1902. By the time this film was made, he had spent 60 years in this trade, the same trade his father and his grandfather had practiced before him, and had been a certified master craftsman since 1934. In the good years before the last war, when he could still afford to employ 3 or 4 assistants, his workshop alone went through more than 100 cubic meters of poplar wood every year. Splitting a trunk section so that almost nothing is wasted takes real skill, and decades of it. Hermanns can look at an unsplit bolen and tell, almost at a glance, exactly how many finished clogs are hiding inside it, and very often what sizes they will turn out to be. On a second chopping block, Hermanns knocks the bark from each trunk section with quick, practiced strokes of a hand axe, rotating the wood, working the edges, roughing it toward the shape of a shoe. Clog making itself is no recent trade here. Wooden shoemakers have worked the Lower Rhine since at least the 16th century, and for many towns in this region, the craft once carried real economic weight. The years before the last war, even as some workshops began adopting machine production for part of the process, were something of a golden age. Nearly every village kept several clog workshops running. In 1938 alone, more than 180 of them operated around Heinsberg, 65 in Porselen by itself. In most villages, clog making was a side income alongside farming. In Porselen and the surrounding area, though, it was usually the main trade, not a supplement to it. Chop by chop, the block starts to look less like firewood and more like a shoe. Hermanns notches the upper section, shapes the heel, tapers the toe, and with those cuts alone decides whether the piece in his hands will become a left shoe or a right one. He flips the blank, squares the bottom, refines the curve of the sides with small, precise strokes. Piece by piece, a rough clog blank takes shape in his hands, ready to leave the yard for the workshop inside. Inside the workshop stands the one machine Hermanns ever let into this otherwise hand-built trade. A copying lathe built by the Flensburg firm Anton and Sons, bought in 1935 and still marked with the maker's name, Anton, cast into its iron base. It was, to the very end, his only concession to mechanization. First, he loosens the clamp with a turn of a hand crank, feeds a rough blank into it, and tightens the clamp back down. Then he crosses the room to a tall wooden cabinet, pulls both doors open, and reveals shelf after shelf of wooden shoe models, what he calls lasts, smooth, worn, each one a template for a different size and shape of clog. He runs his hand along the shelf, lifts down the last that matches the size he's cutting, and carries it back to the machine, where he fits it into the lower clamping section beneath the blank, adjusts its position on its locating pins, and tightens the clamp down with a tool until it holds fast. For the boring stage of the same machine, he needs a second, smaller model. He returns to the cabinet, pulls out a different last, and fits it into its own section of the frame, securing it not with a crank this time, but with a set of wooden wedges tapped in tight with a mallet until the model can't shift. Only then does he turn to the hand crank on the side of the machine and wind it hard, and only then does he reach for the large lever that engages the motor. Then he throws that lever, steps back, and lets the machine take over. The cutting side of the machine runs fully automatic, the boring side beside it only half so, and needs his hand on the controls throughout. A spinning cutter head bites into the rotating blank, and sawdust sprays as the carriage crawls sideways along its length. A frame links blank and model together, turning both at exactly the same speed, so whatever shape is traced against the model's surface is cut, in that same instant, into the blank beside it. The model can't be pushed hard or it wears out fast, so Hermanns keeps the pressure light and reinforces the last's most exposed points, the heel above all, with small nails hammered flush into the wood. A suspended weight on a chain feeds slowly through the gearing overhead, driving the carriage forward at its own unhurried pace until the cutter reaches the toe and the shape is done. He winds the carriage back, loosens the clamp, and lifts out a shoe that didn't exist 90 seconds earlier, then loads the next rough blank, tightens it down, and starts the whole cycle again. One after another, freshly shaped clogs come off the lathe until 3 of them sit waiting on a stump nearby, rough, machine-cut shapes with no interior yet, ready for the boring machine next in line. The difference the machine made was staggering. Working entirely by hand, a master clog maker could turn out perhaps 7 to 10 pairs in a full day. With the copying lathe doing the rough shaping, Hermanns could manage 70 to 80 pairs in that same day, 10 times the output from the same 2 hands. But the machine could only rough a shoe out. Every single pair still needed real hand finishing before it was fit to wear. Hermanns ran the lathe alone, always. It was one job he never handed off. It was only in the preparing and the finishing, the steps before and after the machine, that he ever had real help, sometimes a hired journeyman, but just as often his own wife and daughter, working quietly alongside him. From the lathe, each rough-shaped clog moves to the cutting stand, where Hermanns trims away the little stub caps left at heel and toe, the marks of the spindles that held the blank steady while it turned. A long knife, hinged to the block itself, does the work in a few swift strokes, and the shoe is ready for its next machine. That machine is the borer, and it hollows out the inside of the foot. The trimmed shoe and its matching model sit clamped side by side. Hermanns works a set of levers by hand, rocking them back and forth, and a fixed spoon-shaped drill bit gradually eats its way into the wood, following exactly the interior shape traced from the model beside it. Sawdust pours out in a steady stream, sometimes filling the shoe with spinning curls of wood as the bit reaches deeper, toward the toe, into the heel, wherever the model's contour says to go. Overhead, a system of belts and pulleys turns a drive shaft that keeps the bit spinning at speed, the same simple mechanism seen throughout the workshop. A probe running parallel to the drill controls how wide and how deep the hollow becomes. Nothing here is left to guesswork, and nothing here can be rushed. Seen from the side, the bit works its way deep into the toe of the shoe, carving out space that will, eventually, hold a human foot. It is close, careful work, demanding real concentration and a steady hand, and by the time Hermanns finally retracts the bit, his face is dusted white with fine wood shavings. He loosens the clamp, lifts out a shoe that is, for the first time, hollow enough to wear, and sets it onto a growing stack beside the machine, a pile of hollowed clogs waiting for the hand finishing that only Hermanns himself can give them, before reaching for the next rough blank and clamping it into place for its turn under the drill. Now Hermanns moved to the kep, a purpose-built bench that clamps a pair of clogs side by side so he can work matched left and right shoes at once. A whole rack of specialized hand knives hangs on the wall behind him, each one shaped for a different cut, and over the next stretch of work, he reaches for nearly all of them. He starts with a draw knife, pulling it toward himself in long, even strokes to smooth the exterior of both shoes, shaving away thin curls of wood with each pass. Then he selects a double-edged heel knife from the rack and uses it to model and smooth the heel bed and the sides of the shoe, the part of the clog that will actually cradle a foot. For the deeper interior, he trades that knife for a long-handled hollow knife, tucking the handle under his arm for leverage as he carves out the so-called Himmel, literally the heaven, the hollow roof of the toe box. Where the cut needs more force than his arm alone can give, he taps the handle with a wooden mallet, popping out chunks of wood with each strike until the interior is smooth and hollow all the way through. Wood shavings pile up steadily on the floor around him. Every so often, the blades dull, and Hermanns stops to resharpen. He dips a small, curved whetstone from a can of oil and hones the inside curve of the hollow knife against it, then switches to a flat carving knife and strops it rapidly back and forth on a block of wood until the edge bites clean again. With that fresh edge, he shaves the bottom interior of each shoe perfectly flat, long, thin curls of wood peeling away with every pull, until the footbed is as smooth as he can make it by hand. Finally, he lifts both shoes free of the clamps, holds the pair up together, blows the last of the sawdust out of one, and, satisfied they match, writes the clog size in pencil inside the heel of one shoe, a small private mark that will outlast the workshop itself. The finished pair goes onto a tall stack beside the bench, and he reaches for the next rough pair waiting its turn. Hermanns turns back to the wall of tools once more, reaches first for a small handsaw, reconsiders, and hangs it back on its hook. The blade he actually wants is the long block knife, the same pivoting design he used earlier in the yard, only fitted now with a narrower cutting edge. He carries it to the cutting stand and hooks it to the stump the same way as before. With it, he goes to work on the top edges of the shoe, still sharp from the boring machine, slicing a clean bevel around the opening and rounding off the sharp corner at the back of the heel. A few more passes shave thin strips from the sides, smoothing the exterior into its final curve. When he's satisfied, he lifts the shoe, blows the last sawdust from its surface, and studies the cut edges closely, checking by eye alone that the line is clean all the way around before setting the knife aside. Some customers don't wait for delivery. They simply walk in. A man in a coat and hat steps into the workshop, and the two men greet each other like old acquaintances, which by now they likely are. The customer points toward a stack of finished clogs. Hermanns hands him a pair to examine, and moments later, the customer's wife arrives too, taking the shoes from her husband to look them over herself, while Hermanns points out another pair on the bench. Clogs like these come in more than one style. The Rhenish type, made here, covers only part of the top of the foot with its Himmel, or upper. Its proper fit comes not from the wood itself, but from a leather strap fastened at the ankle. The Dutch type is built differently. Its upper reaches all the way across the instep, holding the foot secure without any strap at all. Hermanns has made both kinds over the years, though the Dutch style only in the last decade of his working life. The customer counts coins and bills from a small purse while his wife talks things over beside him, then hands the money across. Hermanns pockets it, and the two men fall into easy conversation while she listens. A round of goodbyes, a pat on the arm, and the customer walks off with his new pair tucked under his arm. One more sale from a business that, in its day, kept towering stacks of finished wooden shoes standing floor to ceiling around this room. More shoes in that one shop than most people would see in a lifetime. With the customer gone, Hermanns returns to the chopping block and picks up right where he left off, slicing thin strips off the side of another shoe to refine its curve, turning it to trim along the heel, rounding the back edge smooth before setting the knife down and adding the finished piece to the stack. The shavings that spill out of every hollowed clog don't go to waste. Hermanns sweeps them across the floor onto a flat board, carries the board to a tall black stove in the corner, and feeds them straight into the fire. heat for the workshop, free from wood that would otherwise be swept out the door. Then he drags out the Esel, literally the donkey, a simple three-legged wooden stool with a peg driven into the seat, sets it down, and straddles it the way generations of clog makers before him must have done. Wedging a shoe against the peg for leverage, he takes up a two-handed scraper and works it back and forth along the exterior, pulling hard, fast strokes down the length of the toe until the wood is smooth to the touch. When that scraper has done its job, he swaps it for a smaller one and turns his attention to the rim of the opening itself, shaving fine curls of wood off the edge, working the inner lip smooth, eyes fixed close on the work the whole time. He inspects the finished shoe, sets it aside, and reaches for the next rough one waiting on the pile, wedging it against the peg, scraping the exterior again, forcing the toe smooth with the same hard pulls as before. Before this shoe goes onto the finished stack, though, it needs two small holes. Hermanns sets the scraper down, picks up a hand drill, and bores a hole through the top edge on one side of the shoe, then an identical one on the opposite side. Not for decoration, but so that later the finished pair can be tied together with a length of wire for shipping and storage. With both holes drilled, he adds the shoe to the stack, pushes the little bench out of his way, and reaches for the next one. In the workshop's most productive years, in the 1930s and 40s, this was not cottage industry work. It fed heavy industry. Wholesalers carried Hermanns's clogs to chemical plants, glass factories, and the ironworks of the Ruhr, buying in bulk for workers who needed cheap, sturdy footwear on factory floors. Closer to home, Hermanns supplied the surrounding farms directly, delivering fresh wooden shoes to them himself once a month without a middleman in between. Back at the Esel, he takes up the Schraubmesser, a two-handed scraper knife, and smooths the exterior of shoe after shoe, a job some other workshops handed off to a grinding machine, but which Hermanns still did by hand, wedging each shoe against his belly and the peg for grip. With that pass finished, a plain wooden shoe is essentially done, needing only its leather strap. But not every shoe leaving this workshop was so plain. On ordinary weekdays, the unpainted wooden shoe was the standard. Sundays called for something better. Adults preferred theirs dyed black, while children ran around happily in red or blue. These better shoes got real decoration, and that decoration was where his daughter came in, helping finish and embellish the pairs meant for church, for holidays, for showing off a little. Many of these dressier clogs carry a carved floral pattern, cut in with a small tool Hermanns calls the Blümchenmesser, the flower knife, working delicate lines and angled cuts into the wood until a pattern emerges. His own personal mark, carved onto the shoes he made, was an ear of wheat, a small nod to the farming so many clog makers, himself included, kept as a second livelihood alongside the workshop. Once the carving is done, the shoe gets painted black, the pattern still visible faintly through the stain, and a leather strap threaded through the wire holes to finish it. Today, wooden shoes like these are mostly bought as souvenirs. Now and then, someone still wears a pair for gardening, or at a folk festival, or simply stands one on a windowsill as a plant pot, a small, ordinary afterlife for an object that used to mean a person's whole livelihood. When Jakob Hermanns closed his workshop, one of the last clog makers in the Rhineland went with him. These workshops now survive only in museums. Real wooden shoes must be imported from Holland.